Hi, this is John Cottle. HIST820. We're in week 5. What I'm doing is presenting a final lesson plan for an undergraduate study and even potentially a graduate study on the ends of World War II. This would be one of the final lessons being offered regarding the study of World War II. As you can see, I got some of the symbologies of both the Allies and Axis powers, and behind me is the accumulation of the war, or the most memorable portion of the war, if we really talk about any one aspect. However, what I want to talk about today is, does the victor get to write history? It's a real good question, and hopefully we have some real good answers. But oftentimes history can be very murky. We sort of understand different things that potentially could have led up to the war by this time. We have went through each and every battle, some of the goods and some of the bads of the battle, some landmark one-liners said. We got to see some of the generals in action. But as the war was starting to wind down, as even during the war, does the victors get to rewrite the history? What do we really know about World War II sometimes? Like with any war, I can often say we see the depravity of man come out. We see the sins. We see the horrors. And in some cases, we even get to experience them ourselves. For those who've had an opportunity maybe to go to Europe, you can see some of the concentration camps ran by the Nazis in World War II. Auschwitz, Dachau, or two of the Koblenz, or several of the ones that can bring up and invoke memories. And I have no doubt in my mind, because I've been there, that these incidents happened. Likewise, I have no doubt that the atomic bombs that were dropped on Nagasaki and Hiroshima happened. There's no doubt. But now let's get into some of the different and more isolated things. What about what America did? What about what the rest of the Allies did? There's even some people that have called into question our alliance with the Soviet Union. But why would they do that? These are questions that are being answered still even to today. We need to understand that as we progress through and up to the coming of the end of the war, that things were going to be asked at the end of the war. Things that we should be able to answer. But the real question comes down to is, what have we been taught and what have we turned our blind eye to? As I said, we already sort of know the methodology of the war. We also got a chance to see some of the pictures, especially of the Holocaust. There is no doubt that was a horrific situation that went against one group of people. But did America do some of the similar atrocities? Did the Soviets do similar atrocities? Did even the British do similar atrocities? Those are questions that are very tough to ask sometimes in the light of how we view World War II a lot of times. As historians, we should be looking for the truth. We should be objective and subjective at times, but looking for what does the truth represent. Sometimes the truth is even murky. And there is no doubt in my mind that there was some murkiness that was going on even at the end of the war. What did the Soviets do? We often don't hear very much about them, but if you study and look at some of the historical factors as they were advancing on into Germany and especially into the Berlin area from the east side, there were some distinctive and questionable things that they did to the civilian populace. Similarly, from some things I'm reading and things I've read and things that I'm going to continue to read to study this more, Americans were no different in some ways. What did the Soviets do that was so atrocious? They raped women. And initially, I was always taught German women, only to find out it did not matter to them. They just raped women as they were advancing from the east and getting into Berlin. They raped Germans. They raped Polish. And they even raped Russians that were captured during the war and brought back over. What did Americans do? They did some of the similar things to the women in Germany. What did the British do? Similar things. So is the Allies any different in some ways than the Axis powers? The interesting part is, again, those who are the victors get to write the history. But even in the complexity of writing history, we still have to deal with the realities as historians. I've seen the frailty of man and the depravity of man. As much as I'd like to believe that the Americans were squeaky clean, I think we have to ponder and wonder, were they as clean as we want to project them to be? Sure, there was people of faith that served, and we read about them. The 4 chaplains on the Dorchester. The 1 Medal of Honor winner with the Marines that the movie was written. We see those people of faith. But we also are very aware that not everybody's of faith. And not necessarily everybody has the same type of faith. Our question comes down to, though, is if, as one person put it in an article, if the Allies had lost the war, what about them? Would they be able to stand up to the same scrutiny that was provided to the Axis powers? Would they be able to do these things? Would war crimes be similarly done to them? And these are questions you really got to ask yourself. These are things we got to ask as historians to seek and see beyond. Because in reality, these things were done. And I know a lot of people have constantly questioned Nagasaki and Hiroshima for the end. Some have argued, looking back, that it was wrong. Some have argued the other way. But at the end of the day, the question really boils down to, was Nagasaki and Hiroshima similar to the Holocaust? What was the rationale for them things, for those events? Why weren't Americans held to a higher accountability if we were to hold our military forces? We call them the last great generation. But is that something because we were the victors? And while I applaud people when elevating the flag in Iwo Jima and everything else, there's still questions we have to ask. So what do you think? I didn't get into all the details. I didn't get into the proposals of some things. I read an article on Wikipedia about it. I didn't get into all that because a lot of it's poorly sourced. But are we willing to dig deep to be real historians? Or are we just going through and regurgitating some of the similar things that we've been taught all of our lives? I do know the Holocaust was an atrocious event. I do understand that even when we did Nagasaki and Hiroshima, bad things happened. And in some ways, I don't even applaud that. But in looking back, did the victors put their thumbs on the scales of justice? Have we failed to look and recognize that even through all the things, and even through the discussion up to this point in World War II, has the victors really looked at themselves in the mirror and said that they were guiltless? We've got to ask these questions. Think about them. Explore them. Because at the end of the day, we have to ask ourselves those questions as historians. I can write all the things I want and keep myself tilted in one way, but then I'm biased. And I want to present something that is honest and takes a hard look, whether it makes us look good or makes us look bad. I want us to take a hard look at it. We are a fallen creature in a fallen world. But we need to spend time focusing on what God has got for us. And where God is trying to take us. But as one person says, if we can't learn from the past, then how are we supposed to do the future? Let us take a focus on what we can learn from World War II, and especially the end, and even during the war. And to notice and note that war is difficult to navigate.